Coming up next on Backchecking the Bolts, we're going to recap Tampa's 4-1 victory over the Detroit Red Wings. We're going to preview the Carolina home game at 7 o'clock on Saturday. The Bolts face a big road trip coming up next week. They start a 4-game road trip in Seattle on Tuesday night. We're going to talk about all of that and more coming up next right here on Backchecking the Bolts.
Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Hi, I'm your host, Jason Linkus. And as always, I am joined by the managing editor of Raw Charge. He is Justin Godfrey. Justin, the Bolts just faced Detroit. Carolina is coming up next. There's a lot to unpack. Let's backcheck the Bolts. First, let's talk about the Detroit game, a 4-1 victory. Give me your instant reaction.
You know, was it a perfect game? No, but was it a lot better than what we've seen over the last 2 weeks or so? I would definitely say yes. As Coach Cooper said in his post-game press conference, it was by no means a perfect game, but I did think that the intensity was kind of ramped up a little bit. The Lightning were skating really well, especially early in the game. I thought the first 10 minutes they played was probably their best 10 minutes they've played, I don't know, in a week or so, especially against a non-Toronto Maple Leafs team. So, yeah, I really like the energy they put out. They had that little bit of a lull in the second period after they scored the goal. One of their lines got stuck out there for about 4 minutes or so, but they weathered the storm. They pushed a lot of the opportunities Detroit had to the outside and kind of weathered it, got into that third period, had a strong third period. You know, after protecting the lead, they went ahead and extended it a little bit. Gage Gonçalves had a great third period, and then they kind of, finished it off. So kind of slowly getting back to where they need to be. Again, not a perfect game. Still had some defensive miscues, some bad breakouts, but overall, definitely one of their better efforts over the last 2 weeks.
I want to talk a little bit about the first period. If you look at the box score, you only see 8 shots. But Justin, let's go beyond the box score. They attempted 26 shots. As you said, that first 10 minutes of the first period might have been their best 10 minutes in quite some time. What did they do differently that they weren't doing in other games?
So they were getting the puck out of their zone, basically. Detroit wasn't in the Lightning zone for much of that period. So you saw that transition game back. You saw them flowing into the offensive zone. And then good puck retrieval skills while they were in the zone. One thing is, and Cooper alluded to this at the beginning, they probably weren't selfish enough in the first period. There were a couple opportunities. I know Kucherov was right in the slot at one point and he dished it off. They kind of get into that habit of trying to make the better percentage shot sometimes by passing it off, and then they don't get an opportunity at all. So I'd like to see them take maybe a few more shots. Detroit did a good job of blocking shots, which is what they do. They get in the lanes, they mess things up, and they actually had 2. I think I want to say it was Seider made a really nice play at the back post to deny a goal for the Lightning early on. So they kind of had that flow back to their game. A lot of good looks that they passed a couple of them up. I thought Braden Point was flying up and down the ice. He looked really well. That line, the Point, Kucherov, Gonçalves line was really feeling it in that game and looked good, kind of set a nice tone. It was just kind of that Lightning hockey that we're used to seeing.
Justin, the one thing I noticed was, unlike in the Blue Jackets game, they looked quick. They were entering the zone quicker. They had the defense on their heels. The forwards just weren't able to stick on puck quite as much. Is that a mentality of saying we need to be faster, or was that what Detroit was giving them?
A little bit of both is what Detroit was giving them. But again, that all starts in the defensive zone. That all starts with clean breakouts, making that first pass out of your zone. That allows, Point to build up a little bit of speed and drive those defenders back as he enters the zone. So, and Detroit, maybe, they don't have their lineup that they want to be putting out there. Dylan Larkin was out, Andrew Kopp was out. That's your 2 top centers, and both are pretty responsible defensive players. Maybe they're not as cohesive as a forward group, stopping that play in the neutral zone, which gave the Lightning a little bit more space to attack through the zone. So, it's like I said, that top line looked really good. The Yanni Gourde line, I thought, had a good game, and that was kind of tweaked up a little bit. Cooper had put Bjorkstrand on the line. moved Gergensons down to center of the fourth line. So, like you said, a lot of pace and kind of kept Detroit on their heels for most of the early part of the game until that kind of weird shift in the second period.
What was the turning point of the game?
For me, it was the Lightning weathering the stretch after their first goal. They don't score in the first period. They have a lot of good opportunities. Gensel scores early on the power play in the second, and the Lightning kind of push play for another 3 or 4 minutes, and then their fourth line gets stuck out there. It was the Gergensons, Corey Perry, Scott Sabrin line. Kind of got pinned in their own zone a little bit. Detroit got a good matchup. The Patrick Kane line was out there, and Detroit just started really cycling the puck. Something J.J. Moser had mentioned in the previous game against Columbus, that at times the Lightning have been a little too slow in the defensive zone. They've been getting beat to pucks, and you really saw it in that shift where Perry had a chance to get to a puck, got outskated. It was really nerve-wracking kind of as a Lightning fan, because you were like, hey, we've seen this before. And just Detroit's ability to kind of cycle the puck. If you look at the numbers, Darren Radish was on the ice for 4 minutes and 7 seconds. McDonough was out there for 3:52. Perry was out there for 3 minutes. Gergenson's 3:14. Scott Salverin had a cake shift. He was only out there for 2:34. But while the possession was there, the Lightning did do a nice thing where they pushed all the pressure to the outside. Yes, Vasilevsky had to make a couple of good saves, but there were no rebound follow-ups. There was no traffic in front of the net, something that's kind of been plaguing them for a little bit. So yeah, they got pinned in. They eventually cleared it. I think actually Detroit ended up clearing the puck, and Detroit kept the pressure up for a little bit more, but the Lightning got back to their game by the end of the period, and then got into the third. They still had that 1-0 lead, which I think was big. I think if Detroit scores there, it's a different outcome. Lightning score early in the third, go up 2-0. The goal they gave up, a bit of an issue clearing the puck. It allowed Detroit to do a line change. DeBrincat comes on the ice, fires a puck in on that JD Comfort. And the sad thing is Moser did a great job of screening Comfort, but JT kind of left his stick trailing behind him on the play. The puck hits the stick, deflects back past Vasilevsky. Not much you can do on that, other than if you'd cleared the puck earlier in the play. But yeah, I think overall, they weather that storm. They don't give up a goal. They keep the lead going into the third, and then they're able to extend the lead in the third period to close it out like we've seen them do in the past.
Justin, I got to tell you a story. I saw that Darren Radish had played 4 minutes in one shift. It reminded me, there's a story that Mike Keenan, when he was the coach of the Rangers, had Alexei Kovalev. And Alexei Kovalev liked to take some extended shifts. So Mike Keenan said, you know what? I'm going to punish this guy. I'm just going to keep him on the ice. Well, Kovalev sort of read it as a youngster. Hey, my coach is rewarding me. He keeps putting me out there. He's not taking me off the ice. Apparently, he had him out there for, I think it was 10 or 11 minutes.
Yeah,
it was some
like
ungodly amount of time. And Kovalev's just skating, doing his thing, and he's not tiring out. And finally, Mike Keenan, all frustrated, has to bring him back to the bench because he can't tire out Alexei Kovalev. So much for teaching him a lesson.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it was around 8 minutes or something like that. If I remember, I watched the clip a few years ago, and I think Kovalev, he kind of keeps looking at the bench and then like shrugs his shoulder. It just keeps playing. So yeah, sometimes these lessons aren't what they meant to be. Not such the case in the Lightning game. I mean, you kind of saw it. I think Radish probably was gassed. He was probably sucking on those oxygen cans in the locker room afterwards. And that's kind of the problem with those kind of extended shifts when you're out there for such a long time. It's the trickle down effect later in the period. That was about, I think, halfway through the period. So those legs get shot, and it may take you a while to get back into it. So I think that kind of led to Detroit having a couple more good solid shifts after that. But, the Lightning, sometimes you're going to have that happen in a game. And if you can weather the storm, as I said, and then kind of pick your game back up, that's how you pick up these W's. Whereas, maybe a week ago, they give up a goal to Detroit, then a second goal, and then, things are off the rails. So thought it was a good sign that the Lightning are still working their way back, but they are getting closer to being what they were during the winning streak than what they were post-Olympic break.
With Buffalo losing last night to Washington in regulation, the Bolts are now 2 points behind Buffalo for first place in the Atlantic, but they also have 2 games in hand. The team the Lightning just faced, Detroit, though, Justin, you had mentioned the injuries to Dylan Larkin, Andrew Kopp, David Perron, who they traded for. He's still out. This team is getting hurt at the wrong time. Now, according to Todd McClellan, Larkin and Copper out at least 2 weeks. And I was taking a look at the schedule. If you put them out 2 weeks, their next 7 games, Dallas, Calgary, Montreal, Boston, Ottawa, Buffalo. Make that the next 6 games. Those are a bunch of division games. Those are 4-point games. They are going to be extremely shorthanded going into those matchups. Detroit right now is only 2 points clear of the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are just outside of the playoffs. Justin, right now, if you're making a prediction, does Detroit make the playoffs?
It's hard to say. I think they got to go at least 500 in these games without their 2 centers. It's going to be one of these. If they do make it, they're going to be limping into the finish lines. I think they pull it off. I know some of the prognosticators out there. I was looking at some point projections from, I think Evolving Hockey has theirs up. You kind of look at it. They have a bunch of those teams that they're projecting to hit that 95-ish points right now, which I think is going to be your cutoff for those wild card teams. So yeah, it's going to be a fight down to the end. I mean, we're going to start seeing a lot more conference games for all of the people still in it. The nice thing is for the Lightning is, hey, let those teams beat each other up, and then we get to face them in the first round. Maybe make our lives a little bit easier. Just looking at, like I said, the Evolving Hockeys right now, they kind of have the Blue Jackets taking that 3rd spot in the Metro. Hurricanes, Islanders, Blue Jackets, and then the Atlantic, they have the Lightning, Sabres, and Canadians with the Senators. And then they have the Red Wings actually finishing 5th in the divisions. Whatever simulations they're running, whatever their algorithms say, have Ottawa kind of leapfrogging them a little bit. So it's going to be a fight for them. They still have a lot of talent on that team. I mean, DeBrincat, you said JT Conference solid. Patrick Kane still doing things. Their defense, I like the Justin Falk pickup for them. I think they're going to try and be a little more defensive-minded going down the stretch here. So I think their defense is going to keep them into the game. And if they can pull out some of these wins with their top guys out, then they can finish off the last 5 or 6 games. Hopefully, make the playoffs. I'd like to see them in the playoffs.
It's been a while.
I would be akin to, I wouldn't be differential to a Lightning Detroit first round playoff. They've had some fun ones over the years. Kind of remember that big massive brawl they had a few years ago with Mike Blundin in the middle of it, and just a pile of players punching at each other. So bring some of that back in the first round of the playoffs. So
now, Justin, you had mentioned that Patrick Kane is doing Patrick Kane things. Well, that brings us to the nurture marketing trivia question of the day.
All right, I get to screw this up.
Nurture marketing is going to be sponsoring a Nikita Kucherov jersey to one lucky fan of our podcast. All you have to do when you listen to the podcast, email the answer to backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com, and you'll be registered for that Nikita Kucherov jersey. Now, this promotion is going to be running throughout the month of March, so you have many chances to enter, but you can enter as many times as you like. So here's the question, Justin. Patrick Kane recently passed Mike Modano as the top scoring U.S.-born player in NHL history. Right now, he has 1,381 points. Modano has 1,374. I gave you numbers 1 and 2. Who are his numbers 3, 4, and 5?
Jeez. Oh, man. I am going to struggle with this one. So it's Modano and Kane.
Correct.
Is Eddie Olczyk on there? Is he an American?
He is an American, but he's not
He's
on
not
there.
up there. All right. All right. God. Phil Kessel?
Phil Kessel, good guess. He is number 11. He finished 8 points shy of 1,000 in his career.
Okay. Trying to think of 1,000-point Americans. What are their total point totals for the next 3?
The next 3 is a defenseman with 1,232 points. I think this is going to be the toughest one. Number 4 is a forward with 1,216. Number 5 is a forward with 1,068.
Phil Housley in there?
That is number 3, correct? The defenseman, okay. Phil Housley.
That was about the only, once you said defenseman, I was like, it's got to be Phil Housley. So
Phil Housley, put up 338 goals, 1,232 points.
When you say
so
Phil
you need
Housley,
numbers 4 and 5.
When you say Phil Housley, what uniform do you picture him in?
Winnipeg.
All right, I'm a Caps guy, but yeah.
So, again, growing up, I mean, Phil Housley ran that Winnipeg power play. I will always think of him as a Jet.
All right, cool. All right, so 4 and 5 we're going with. Are they active, or what was their era of? Okay, 80s,
Okay,
90s guys?
one retired, I think 2 years ago. May have
Okay.
been. I don't think he played last year. I think it was 2 years ago. The other one is a former broadcaster who retired in the early 2000s.
Oh, man. Tired like a year or two ago. I'm sure I'm going to feel like an idiot when you say these names. Roenick? Did Jeremy Roenick get up
Jeremy
there?
Roenick, number 4. Jeremy
all
Roenick,
right.
number 4.
So,
So this one is the toughest one. I mean, I didn't expect you to get Housley, but this one is one that I just would not have expected when I looked at the list.
so what teams did he play for?
Sharks. That's what he's known for. Also, Dallas.
Patrick Marleau? No, he's Canadian.
He's
Sharks?
Canadian.
You said Sharks?
Yeah.
Who else?
Dallas.
Sharks and Dallas. And he's a forward. God,
Yeah.
I'm going to feel dumb. I'm going to feel dumb not getting this one.
Well, Justin, I'm going to give you the answer. It's
All
Joe
right.
Pavelski.
Ah, that's who I was thinking of. I always get him and Marleau mixed up for some reason because I'm an idiot. But yeah, the guy that everybody saw at Burns Steakhouse when he was a free agent before he went to Dallas, and everyone thought he was coming to Tampa. So nice. I like that question. So
Hey, that's it. It was one. It was with Patrick Kane coming into town. I was trying to find a Detroit angle. Thought it was a decent one there. Now, numbers 6 through 10 are Keith Tkachuk, Joe Mullen, Doug Waite, Brian Leach, and Pat LaFontaine. Now, Pat LaFontaine did not have the concussion issues he had.
oh yeah,
He might still be number 1. He
That's
was
exactly.
putting up. He had a tremendous career when he played with Alexander Mogilny and I think it was might have been Alexei Zhitnik up in Buffalo in 1993. That line was phenomenal. And of course, they played in the old Adams division where they could never get past Montreal and Boston.
Yep. So, like I wasn't really a hockey fan back then, but you see some of the highlights of the stuff that he did. And yeah, he was one of those players you kind of wonder if it hadn't been for the injuries, how good could he have been?
For everyone out there, the 3 names you want to email, you can email one of the 3, Phil Housley, Jeremy Roenick, or Joe Pavelski. Email that to backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com. That'll get you registered to win a Nikita Kucherov jersey, compliments of Nurture Marketing. Now, Justin, let's take a look ahead. Let's backcheck the Bolts and look at that Carolina game. It's going to be a tough one. Carolina right now, 88 points, top in the Eastern Conference. The Bolts are 4 points behind them. The Bolts do have a game in hand. So far this season, they split. Tampa won 6-4 back in December. Carolina with the 5-4 win in Raleigh a couple weeks ago. In both games, the Bolts fell behind 3-0. What does Carolina do that makes it so difficult for Tampa at times?
It's just the constant pressure game that they play. You know, Carolina is going to be in your face from the minute that puck stops. They're going to be launching shots from every angle in the offensive zone. They're going to be retrieving the pucks. They're going to be forechecking you. If you do get the puck into the defensive zone, their forwards are going to be pressuring the points. And that just kind of, with the way the Lightning's offense works, it kind of gives them an added pressure. You know how the Lightning like to work all the pucks back to the blue line, shoot from there. When those lanes aren't open, it's kind of hard for the Lightning to generate a lot of offense. It leads to those turnovers those dangerous turnovers at the blue line, either the offensive blue line or your own blue line. So the Lightning got to be really good with the puck. They got to be clean on their breakouts. They got to try and catch Carolina on some transition plays. I'm still not sold on Carolina's goaltending. I think we talked a little bit about this last week when we were looking at those Stanley Cup odds. Yeah, Carolina's been good the last, 10 games or so. I think they're 7-3-0, but they've been giving up some goals, which is kind of odd because they don't give up a lot of chances. If you look, they're still one of the best teams in terms of scoring chances against, high danger chances against, but they're just not really getting the goaltending they need right now. So I think the Lightning just need to find ways to get shots on net. Retrieving pucks is going to be big for them as well. So get those second and third opportunities, something that we haven't seen during this little stretch. So if they can do that, their best defense is going to be keeping Carolina in their own zone. Don't get down 3-0. I mean, just a little bit of advice, maybe not spot them 3 goals because you just burn so much energy. Credit to the Lightning for coming back in both those games from 3 down, but you burn so much energy doing that. It's kind of hard to keep it up and get that 4th goal. So So that's going to be my advice. Don't give up 3 goals. Keep the puck in the Carolina zone, and then just get shots on net.
You talked about Carolina's defense leaking a little bit. In their last 5 games, they gave up 4 to Vancouver, 3 to Edmonton, 5 to Calgary, 4 to Pittsburgh, and 3 in their 3-1 loss yesterday to St. Louis. Is this as much as their defense struggling a little bit, or is it their goaltending? There's always been question marks about Carolina's goaltending with Frederik Andersen and Bussi in net. What's your opinion?
You look at some of these, like these scoring chances against, like that Blues game that they lost 3-1. I think it was 2-1 with an empty netter, basically. They only gave up 16 scoring chances at 5-on-5 and only 3 high danger chances. Against the Canucks, they gave up 4 goals, but only, again, 3 high danger chances. Seattle had 4 against them. So I think the defense is kind of doing their job a little bit. They have, this really solid blue line back there, but they just need a little bit more out of their goaltending right now. I did take a quick look at the numbers, kind of sense the break here. You're looking at Frederik Andersen. They've split the starts pretty evenly, and they each have 4 stars. Frederik Andersen's 3-1. He's got an 875 goals against. An 875 save percentage and a 2.73 goals against. His goals saved above average is he's doing it. It's 1.24. So he's basically stopping the pucks he needs to. As far as Bussi, you're looking at he's 2-2 since the break. He's got an 835 save percentage and a 3.81 goals against. Yeah,
835.
And then he's at a negative.
Did he remember
4.4.
his glove?
I don't know. He signed that. He signed that extension, and he's just sitting back on that big fat wallet now. He's a great story this year. I mean, the guy was on waivers. He picked up off of waivers, and he turned it into a nice contract. So. Yeah, I think you just kind of go through some of these lulls sometime as a goaltender. We've seen it with Vasilevsky. You just kind of, for whatever reason, you get out of sorts a little bit. You stop making the saves that you're expected to make, and then takes you a game or 2 to get back into it. Of course, that being said, he'll get to start tomorrow and make like 42 saves or something like that just to make us look bad. I think there are holes in the Carolina game that the Lightning can exploit, but I think they're gonna have to focus on a shoot first mentality. Sometimes that's hard for the Bolts. We saw it against Detroit. We've seen it ever since Cooper's been here. Kucherov's not a shoot first guy. He's just not. I mean, this guy could be probably a 55 goal scorer if he shot the puck as much as he should. But he's a guy who's going to set up his teammates. Gage Gonsalves is the same. He's a setup guy. He's a playmaker. Point is a playmaker as well. Outside of like a guy like Brandon Hagel and Gensel a little bit, there's not a lot of shoot first mentality kind of guys on the roster. So it's hard for him, and I like the creativity that they have out there, but sometimes you just got to keep it really simple and just start putting pucks on net, control the front of the net, get those rebounds and those second chance opportunities, and make Carolina work coming out of their own zone.
Let's talk about special teams, because Carolina's penalty kill, I saw the game the other night, Carolina, when they played Pittsburgh, their penalty kill is extremely aggressive. How do the Bolts react when they face a penalty kill that is that aggressive?
It's tough. Again, it gets back to the Lightning, what the Lightning like to do, and can they accomplish it against Carolina? And it's a team they struggle against. I think they're 1 for 5 on the power play against them this year, so it's not horrible. 20% is 20%. But with Carolina, they don't drop their forwards back in a shell. Their penalty killing forwards are out there pressuring the points, and the Lightning, who love to get those big shots from Darren Radish and Victor Hedman from the point. If they can't work the puck back there, they got to find a different way to kind of work things around. So it's going to be a lot on Kucherov. Carolina likes to pressure Kucherov when he has the puck on the power play. So as you see, like Gensel work it back to him on the boards, you're going to have 2 people coming out to attack Kucherov. So it's going to be on him to find the open player. I think Gensel becomes a key factor on this power play down low. If he can control the puck, maybe walk out in front, get a shot off, or find that seam over to Bjorkstrand on the far circle. I think that's what you're going to be looking for the Lightning to do, kind of work the puck down low a little bit more. And then that'll draw those wingers back in, those top line defenders, and maybe open up the points again. So I think the Lightning early on should focus on working the puck down low, get that rebound out in front of the net, maybe point in the slot and bang it home. So that's what I think what you're going to want to see. Carolina's super aggressive on the penalty kill too. If they think they can break it out, they're going to. you hear the phrase power kill a lot. They're kind of the originators of that kind of style of play where just because you're shorthanded doesn't mean you can't generate offense. So if they get a turnover, their forwards are going to fly the zone. So it is tough to defend against. It leads to a lot of 2-on-1 rushes, but it also opens them up. If a forward flies the zone a little bit too fast and you can pick that pass off, now you got a 4-on-3 or a 5-on-3 advantage. So look for the Lightning to be cognizant of that. Make sure that they're keeping an eye on those forwards flying out and trying to intercept any kind of breakout. But one thing about the Detroit game, there weren't any penalties really at all. I think each team had a power play in the first period. That was it. The rest of the games, hopefully they can keep it at 5-on-5 for most of the game.
In the last game, Declan Carlisle didn't play in the last 10 minutes. He was banged up. Justin, if he can't go, who's in?
I think you see probably Steve Santini rotate back in. It does sound like Eric Chernak is day-to-day. He was out the last few, but at the morning skate, Cooper said he's basically considering him and Nick Paul day-to-day from here on out. So if he doesn't play against Carolina, expect him to be back for the road trip. I think Santini comes in. You may see a call-up. Again, the Lightning are kind of limited in terms of the number of call-ups they can make now that it's post-trade deadline. They've already used one to bring up Santini earlier in the week. So they got 4 more, I believe. 5 is the new limit. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think they're going to try and push through it. Hopefully Carlisle's not too banged up. There was no word on him after the game, which, 99% of the time, that's what you hear out of the Lightning. I doubt we'll hear anything today either. So kind of keep an eye on the crunch roster and see if anybody's scratched tonight for their game, and then deduce
Justin,
it
real
there.
quick. So they're only allowed 5 call-ups after the trade deadline?
So yeah, with the trade deadline, it used to be 4. It sounds like they kind of pushed in that new extra recall for this year. So that being said, there are emergency recalls that you're allowed to make. Detroit actually used those for their forwards. There are some stipulations with those emergency recalls. Sometimes you can't just recall people willy-nilly after the trade deadline. Kind of keeps teams from loading up on rosters. So you're allowed basically 5 recalls after that. There's only a month left in the season or so most teams don't run into this. But if you do get into a kind of an injury stretch here, it could be something to keep an eye on.
Justin, the Lightning front office put out a post that the Syracuse Crunch had made a trade. Now, the AHL trade deadline does not mirror the NHL trade deadline. The NHL trade deadline expired on March the 6th. The AHL trade deadline expires today. What happens when those AHL players are traded during this, we'll call it a week and a half period?
Basically, it's one of those things that a lot of, especially newer fans, may not realize that the trade deadline doesn't mean teams can't make trades. So as you mentioned yesterday, the Lightning and the Red Wings announced that they had made a trade. Detroit sent a veteran defenseman, Ian Mitchell, to the Lightning for Wojciech Stachowiak and Michael Milne, a couple of forwards in the Lightning organization. All 3 of those players are playing in the AHL right now. They do have NHL contracts, but they are playing in the AHL. So one of the big things is after the NHL trade deadline, if you're not on the roster, you are not eligible to play in the postseason. These trades that they were made, Mitchell would not be able to play in the postseason for the Lightning. The same thing with Stachowiak and Milne for Detroit. They take care of Syracuse. They do a pretty good job of making sure their affiliate has what they need for their playoff runs. I think this is more of probably a Detroit pushed trade with the injuries to Larkin and Cup. They did have to call up a couple people from Grand Rapids, and it was 2 of their top forwards that they called up. So they're looking to kind of replace that. Stachowiak's had a solid year for the Crunch. He was a free agent signing. A lot of fans wanted to see what he could do at the NHL level. Never got that chance. Michael Milne was brought in earlier this year in a trade with Minnesota that sent Boris Tkachuk the other way. But kind of a depth move for both teams. But you're going to see this. I think you'll probably see a couple more trades trickle through. But the big restriction is these are pretty much just for the AHL franchises, the affiliates. You're not going to see any of these trades. It's very unlikely you're going to see any call-ups based off of them. It's just general managers helping their affiliates out, making sure they're stacked for the playoff run. I mean, you figure, Declan Carlisle should be playing in Syracuse probably. Max Crozier, who's hurt now, Syracuse was counting on him. Now they have Santini up there as well. So those are three veteran defensemen that Syracuse was counting on. So they bring in the 27-year-old Mitchell. Yeah, it's kind of funny that I saw Ian Mitchell. I was like, man, that guy's must be like 38 years old. It seems to be around forever. He's actually 27. I think it's just one of those names that looks like a player that's been around forever. Kind of lost in all the trade deadline madness last week. I did see on the AHL transaction page that Connor Geeky and Charles Edward Destu, the two waiver exempt players on the Lightning, were actually paper transacted to the Crunch on Friday and then immediately called back up. So that gave them eligibility to play in the AHL playoffs if they need to. I think that was more for Geeky, who probably will go back down to Syracuse once Nick Paul's healthy. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how they do with the AHL trade deadline at 3. You may see one or two more kind of small moves like this.
Well, let's talk about some NHL news real quick that happened yesterday. First of all, Austin Matthews, the star winger for the Toronto Maple Leafs, took a knee-on-knee hit from Radko Gudas of the Anaheim Ducks. He did not return in the game. It would be a huge loss for Toronto. The injury did not look good. Hopefully he's not out long term. The Leafs aren't going to make the playoffs, but you have to wonder when anytime you take a knee-on-knee hit, is there going to be some major damage to the knees? But the other news that was out there, Justin, was the Ottawa Senators now have a first-round pick. They initially lost it due to salary cap circumvention when they tried to trade Evgeny Dadonov a couple years ago. They got that pick back, and a lot of people are crying foul that the league shouldn't have done this, but this precedent was set much earlier, Justin. Tell everyone why.
So yeah, a few years ago, back when there were slightly different rules to the salary cap and contracts you could sign, the Devils signed Ilya Kovalchuk to a long-term deal. I think this is like a super long-term deal with a tremendous amount of front-end loading to it. The NHL,
it was a 17-year deal.
Yeah, 17-year deal. So like I said, things were different back then, but most of like 90% of the salary came in the first few years. It was one of those that you sign the deal knowing that you're going to buy out the last 5 years of it, and it's not going to cost you a lot of money. It was too much for the NHL, so they fined New Jersey a bunch of money. They voided the contract. Then they also fined them, I believe, a first round and a third round pick. They basically voided those picks. After a few months, the NHL announced that maybe you can draft, but just not at the top of not where your pick is supposed to be. So that's kind of what they did with Ottawa as well.
Ottawa's going to be drafting 32nd. They have the very last pick in the first round. And they can't trade it.
Yeah, I think that's the key right there is they can't trade up. I think they can trade it down. So if they want to include in it for some other picks, they just can't trade up. So basically they can't get any additional value out of it, which, there's a couple factors to this. One, I think the biggest one is the change in ownership groups. The Dadonov deal happened just as Ottawa was being sold. So by the time the NHL announced the original fine and sanctions, they actually had a new ownership group in there. So, their case is, hey, it was the old guys that did it, maybe be nice to us a little bit. So I could see the 32nd pick. It's fine. It makes the bookkeeping much easier too. You kind of, when one team doesn't draft in a pick, it just seems kind of odd that there's only 31 first round picks technically, but the guy who's drafted in the first pick with the second round is still technically the 32nd pick. So I think they fined him an additional $1 million or something like that. $1 million Canadian, I believe, which is kind of odd. But
I got about no $600,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's funny. Somebody tipped me a $5 bill yesterday, $5 Canadian bill the other day, and it was $3.25 US dollars. So, but hey, it's pretty. I like their money. It'll just go in the old fire deposit box until I make another trip up to Canada. So, long-term investment.
Now, real quick, I want to say one of the reasons I think they're giving the pick back and why I think they gave the Devils their pick back. Back in 1983, there was a dispute between the ownership of the St. Louis Blues and the NHL. The Blues did not draft anybody that year. And I think they want to avoid those kind of situations where you decimate a franchise, not giving them the ability to make draft picks, because it's not like the NFL where, hey, this draft pick, he's in the league the next year and can have an impact. The guys at the back half of the NHL draft are not going to show up for 3 or 4 years. and it hurts the minor league development of a lot of these organizations if they don't have first round picks. And I think they want to avoid those situations.
I think the original intention was they wanted to punish Ottawa because they basically forgot to tell, I think, Vegas that there was a no trade clause in Dadonov's contract, and they wanted to avoid other teams doing that. So I think they did want to bring the hammer down initially pretty hard just to kind of nip that in the bud a little bit. But like I said, with the ownership change, if the original owners were still there, they may have held on to that, forfeiting the first round pick. So it makes sense. Ottawa had a chance to, it was kind of funny because they were like, well, we're going to forfeit the 24, 25, or 26 pick. And so Ottawa kicks the can down the road 2 years. And then when they finally have to make a decision, the league comes around. And it sounds like, I think Elliot Friedman was talking about it. It sounds like Ottawa had been quietly campaigning for this behind the scenes for quite a while. So it's not like this is just an abrupt decision that came out of the NHL. I think Ottawa was really kind of laying out their case for why they should still be able to draft. And like you said, the 32nd pick.
Justin, tell us what's going on at Raw Charge.
We're just kind of in that grind situation right now. We'll kind of talk about that Ian Mitchell trade a little bit more today. I think I'll write something up as soon as we're done here. Just kind of preview going into the weekend. We got the big road trip coming up out west. So for all you folks that love to stay up late night, there's going to be plenty of late night hockey for you next week. We'll have those games and recaps done as well. Kind of look forward to free agency a little bit. Maybe start pondering some possible playoff. We'll have stuff posted over there. Go read www.rawcharge.com. Follow us on Blue Sky. Take a look at our Facebook page.
I have a feeling some of that free agency talk is going to mention Darren Radish's name a little bit, since he is probably the most coveted blue liner that looks like he's going to hit free agency. It'll be interesting to see what the Lightning does. That is today's podcast for Backchecking the Bolts. We'll be back with you on Sunday. We're going to recap the home game against Carolina and preview the Lightning's 4-game West Coast road trip that starts with Seattle on Tuesday night, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. For Justin Godfrey, who you could see at www.rawcharge.com, I am Jason Linkus. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe to the Backchecking the Bolts YouTube channel, or whatever podcast platform you're using. Make sure you hit that like button. Thanks again for joining us, and go Bolts.
Go Bolts.
Thank you for listening to Backchecking the Bolts. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, and Deezer. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky at rawcharge.com. You can follow the show on X at Tampa_Bolts_pod, and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Backchecking the Bolts. If you're interested in advertising on the show or partnering with us, you can find more information in the show notes or email Jason at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com.